This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek FM.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Welcome everyone to Notes from the Edge, a subshow of our Star Trek Discovery podcast, The Edge. I'm C Bryan Jones, or Chris, and I'll be your host as we flip through the pages of our notebook. In Notes from the Edge, we'll explore connections between Discovery and the greater Star Trek universe, which includes the prior 6 TV series and 13 films, as well as the massive literary universe, because there are elements from there that are being worked into the series. And we'll also delve deeper into some of the ideas unique to Discovery. I kick off each episode of Notes with my thoughts on the latest episode of Discovery, which this time means What's Past Is Prologue. I'll cover 5 main points in the thoughts section: the meaning of the title, the fate of Lorca, acting Captain Saru, the timeline, and the role of the mycelial network in how we think about the prime, mirror, and other parallel universes. Then, in the notes section, I'll delve into all the past Terran Emperors who have appeared in Star Trek's mirror universes on screen and off. Let's start off by talking about the title, What's Past Is Prologue. It's a line that comes from Shakespeare's The Tempest, a play that has had great influence on Star Trek and science fiction in general, not only because references to it can be found in Star Trek stories, but also because it is the basis for Forbidden Planet, the 1956 film that influenced Gene Roddenberry and indeed much of TV and film science fiction from that point forward. If you haven't seen it, you really should go and watch it. Spock references The Tempest in the 3rd season TOS episode, Is There in Truth No Beauty?
Miranda. There you are. Oh, brave new world that has such creatures in it.
'Tis new to thee.
And Gorkon references it in The Undiscovered Country.
You don't trust me, do you? I don't blame you. If there is to be a brave new world, our generation is going to have the hardest time living in it.
As does Chang.
Ah. The game's afoot, huh?
Saucer's been hit.
Our revels now are ended, Kirk.
Data also performs The Tempest in the 7th season TNG episode Emergence.
Graves at my command have waked their sleepers. Oped and let them forth by my so potent art. But this rough magic I here abjure. And when I have required some heavenly music, which even now I do, to work mine end upon their senses, that this airy charm is for, I'll break my staff, bury it certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than did ever plummet sound, I'll... Captain? Sir, your attention is wandering.
Data, I can barely see you.
So, why did the writers choose a line from The Tempest as the title of this episode of Discovery? Well, I can't say for certain since I'm not inside their heads. and I don't watch After Trek or read news about the show, so if it has been answered there, I'm not aware of it. But from my own viewing, there are some interesting parallels between this episode and The Tempest. Not exactly parallels, but similar elements that feel like a connection in theme. After the battle between Lorca and Georgiou, Burnham finds the Emperor hiding away in her sanctuary. Really cool set design, by the way. The two of them hunker down there as Lorca searches for them. In the opening of The Tempest, Prospero and his daughter Miranda watch from shore as a ship carrying Alonso, the King of Naples, is weathering a storm. The image of a ship weathering a storm, in this case the storm of Lorca and his troops, came to mind. And Burnham, being Georgiou's daughter in this universe, echoes Prospero and Miranda. Lorca, who was once Georgiou's right hand, reminds me of Antonio, who betrays Prospero. Of course, Antonio was Prospero's younger brother, and Prospero was male, but I just find these very loose similarities interesting. I can imagine the backstory of the Mirror Universe and all the Georgiou, Lorca, Burnham palace intrigue following loosely the plot of The Tempest. Back to the line that gives us the title, it goes like this in a conversation between Antonio and Sebastian, the king's brother, meaning Alonso, the king of Naples, who plots to kill the king and take the throne for himself. Antonio tries to convince Sebastian to commit the murder, talking about the choice they have before them. And he says, "She that is queen of Tunis, she that dwells 10 leagues beyond man's life, she that from Naples can have no note unless the sun were post, the man ith moons too slow till newborn chins be rough and razorable, she that from whom we all were sea swallowed, though some cast again, and by that destiny to perform an act, whereof what's past is prologue, what to come in yours and my discharge." In other words, contrary to the modern meaning of the phrase, what's past is prologue, which has become this idea that what has happened before will happen again, that we're doomed to repeat history because the past tells us what will happen. The meaning here is that the future is unwritten. Everything that has happened up to this moment merely brought us to this moment and put the pieces in place for what comes next, but we must make a choice to continue the story. Burnham makes a similar statement to Georgiou.
Lorca believes destiny brought me to him. He doesn't get to tell me what my future is. I'm responsible for forging my own path. We all are.
And Lorca also sees everything that happened to him as a mirror set up for this moment, when he will take what he sees as his rightful place as emperor.
Believe in destiny now, Mr. Stamets?
That's rhetorical, right?
Your lack of vision continues to disappoint me. I used to suffer from that too. But nothing that's happened to me was an accident. Not ending up in another world, not finding a ship that would help me return here. None of it. I'm living proof that fate is real.
To that end, let's go back to the line, "We all were sea swallowed, though some cast again, and by that destiny to perform an act." Think about discovery in these two universes. Georgiou dies in one, Burnham is killed in one and has her own life essentially taken away in the other through the court-martial. Lorca is swallowed up by an ion storm, recast in a new life in the Prime Universe, and is convinced that destiny brought him and Michael back together for the completion of his original plan. There's a lot here, and this is a long-winded way of saying that I think the title is a very appropriate one, and that the background behind it is interesting. I'm someone who really loves titles in general, so thinking about why a title was chosen is something that I love doing. And it may be a bit of a stretch here. Again, the connections to The Tempest are very loose, and the characters don't neatly line up. Lorca is more Sebastian in wanting to seize the throne, although earlier I said Antonio because of his betrayal of Giorgio. But it certainly feels that a few ideas beyond the title were plucked from the famous play. Let's keep talking about Lorca, and specifically the question that has been on the minds of many fans: will we see Prime Lorca in Season 2? There seems to be the assumption that Prime Lorca is still floating around out there, and we've just been watching Mirror Lorca posing as him, as if Mirror Lorca alone traveled to the Prime Universe, while Prime Lorca remained elsewhere in the Prime Universe, doing his own thing somewhere else. But this isn't how it works. The true background of Lorca's story is unclear, but based on what we've been told on screen, both now and in the past, Prime Lorca is dead. I'll go back to this as a starting point.
It happened twice. First, we were in our own transporter chamber, and then we faded. And then, when we finally materialized, we were here, wherever this is.
Captain, the transporter chief mentioned a surge of power. The transporter lock might have been affected by the ion storm, and we just materialized somewhere else.
Yes, here. Not our universe, not our ship. Something parallel. Parallel universe, coexisting with ours on another dimensional plane. Everything's duplicated. Almost. Another Enterprise? Spock with a beard?
Another Captain Kirk, another Dr. McCoy, and
an exchange. If we're here,
then our counterparts must have been transporting up at the exact same time. Similar storms on both universes disrupted the circuits. We're here, and they're on our Enterprise.
That's how Kirk, Bones, Uhura, and Scotty ended up in the Mirror Universe. They swapped places with their Mirror Universe counterparts during transport. In What's Past Is Prologue, we are given an explanation for how Lorca ended up in the Prime Universe.
After you sold me out and ruined our coup attempt, I was down on Prior's World recruiting allies when the Emperor caught up with the brand. As I beamed back to join the fight, her torpedoes hit. And luckily, so did an ion storm. Just caused a transporter malfunction. And know where I ended up?
Frankly, I'm still stuck on the not dead part.
A parallel universe.
The ion storm must have swapped her transporter signatures.
To me, it was physics, acting as the hand of destiny. My destiny.
It's the same thing, so it stands to reason that the two Lorcas swapped places. Prime Lorca appeared aboard the ISS Buran, while Mirror Lorca appeared aboard the USS Buran. Prime Lorca, if even alive, is not in the Prime Universe. Initially, my next thought on this was that Prime Lorca was killed when the ISS Charon destroyed the ISS Buran in the chase that we see in this episode. However, we aren't actually shown that the Charon destroyed the Buran, and since records indicate that Lorca was on the run and wanted for the murder of Burnham, the Buran must have escaped. Of course, records also indicate that the Buran was destroyed in the Mirror Universe, so that was the fate of both versions of the ship. We just don't know when it happened. The fate of Prime Lorca is, at best, unclear. If the Buran was destroyed during the chase, then Prime Lorca likely died at that time. If not, he may have died in the ship's later destruction. He might have also escaped and be hiding out somewhere, but it seems that it would be tough to survive in this universe, and he'd still be stuck in the Mirror Universe anyway. My take is the simplest one. The two Lorcas swapped places, each finding themselves on an unfamiliar Buran. Both Burans were destroyed. In the Mirror Universe, the ship was destroyed in battle, and Lorca went down with the ship. In the Prime Universe, Lorca destroyed the Buran himself. As he has explained on more than one occasion, only he did it to cover up his secret that he was actually from another universe, rather than to spare his crew a life of torture, as he has claimed. I'd like to know more about Lorca's story and what happened after that swap took place, and maybe we'll learn something in Dayton Ward's Drastic Measures, which will be available this week on February 6th. Although, that book is set 10 years before the battle at the Binary Stars, and Lorca is a lieutenant commander, according to the synopsis. So, I don't know. We'll at least learn a little bit about the real Lorca, so that'll be good. As for what happened after the Lorcas swapped universes, we'll probably have to wait a while to find out what happened there, if we ever find out at all. But when we first meet Lorca, it's 6 months after the battle at the Binary Stars. In what's Past Is Prologue, he states that his followers have been undergoing torture aboard the Terran for 1 year, 212 days. So he was in the Prime Universe for more than a year before we met him. And now, he's gone. He's completely gone. Which brings us back to the question of whether we'll see him in Season 2. Well, I just finished explaining why his Prime incarnation is likely dead. And we watched his mirror incarnation die. So, no chance, right? Well, the way in which we see Mirror Lorca die is one path to bringing him back. He was absorbed by the mycelial network. He fell directly into that orb, and the mycelial network makes all life possible in every universe, we are told. So, there's also the chance that he could reappear thanks to some sort of mycelial magic, the same way they could bring Culber back if they want to. And then there's that little green spore that lands on Tilly's shoulder. So we'll see. Anything is possible. Jason Isaacs was so good in this character. I think the show will really be missing something special without him. And I don't know how they pull it off, but I wouldn't mind seeing him again in Season 2. The Prime version. All right, let's move on to the new captain, or the acting captain, Saru.
It is well known that my species has the ability to sense the coming of death. I do not sense it today. I may not have all the answers. However, I do know that I am surrounded by a team I trust. The finest a captain could ever hope to command. Lorca abused our idealism. And make no mistake, Discovery is no longer Lorca's. She is ours. And today will be her maiden voyage. We have a duty to perform, and we will not accept a no-win scenario. You have your orders. On your way.
What a fantastic moment. It's not the most inspirational speech a Starfleet captain has ever given, but it is a good one, and it moved me as I listened. What I love most about it is how Saru has grown as a character over these 13 episodes. If you've listened to me for very long, if you've listened to The Orb, The Ready Room, Warp 5, the various shows I do or have done over the years, then you know how much value I place on character arcs. I think Saru has grown more than any character thus far. Tilly is my number 2. And to see someone overcome self-doubt, to see them rise up to the circumstances in which they find themselves and inspire confidence in others is wonderful. And to see an actor elevate the material he's been given the way that Doug Jones has is equally wonderful. I don't know if they'll stick with Saru as captain in Season 2, or even for the remainder of Season 1, because we have 2 episodes to go, but I'd like to see them do that. We could have our first alien lead captain, and a very good one. Now, let's jump to the end. Discovery's return to the Prime timeline. When Stamets started hinting that they might not end up exactly when they wanted, and they certainly repeated this quite a few times to make sure that we were prepared for what happened at the very end, I thought they might do something drastic, such as jump 10 years forward so the show could continue in the familiar original series era. Or they might jump very far back to separate themselves from TOS and rid themselves of the concern about consistency with such a familiar era. Or they might jump way ahead, beyond TOS, maybe closer to the next generation. This one I never realistically considered, but, it was an option. But instead, we just ended up 9 months in the future. This is much more reasonable, and it allows them to create some final drama surrounding the war with the Klingons. However, it also creates a new timeline. We may not, we probably won't, stay in this alternate timeline, but since we know that the Klingons did not conquer the Federation less than 10 years before Kirk's missions, we are, for the moment, clearly not in the prime timeline as we know it. If it helps, think of this as the alternate timeline of all good things. That future that we saw with the Next Generation crew, that was a possible future. That future never happened, at least not in what we consider the prime timeline. This is a similar situation. I don't say this as a justification for the belief by many fans that the entire series is set in a different timeline from the rest of Star Trek. And as you know, I'm not entirely sold on Discovery being set in the prime timeline thus far myself, but I'll take the writers at their word. What I'm saying is that Discovery has returned from the mirror universe and found itself in a timeline that differs from the one in which the original series and all subsequent series are set. I think this will be remedied in the final 2 episodes because they can't leave it with the Klingons controlling most of Federation space. But they did create a new timeline with this jump. How do they get out of it? Well, one way is time travel, which they've already used at the end of this episode, so why not use it again? Another is to equip all remaining Starfleet vessels with the ability to crack the Klingon cloak and thus push the Klingons back into their own space. This one seems possible. Another is for Burnham to use insight she gained from negotiating with the Firewolf to reason with the Klingons. Perhaps Cole, who we find out didn't die. Another is that Mirror Georgiou is handed over to the Klingons as a sacrifice. I'm doubtful this would make much difference. It just popped into my head. And of course, L'Rell's story isn't over yet. She'll play some kind of role. I have to think the mycelial network will play a part too. And given that the writers really need to get rid of the mycelial network, both in the Prime and Mirror universes, to reconcile Discovery with the rest of Star Trek, it could be that its role in setting the timeline straight will be its last hurrah. And that's the last thing I want to touch on in thoughts. I think the mycelial network is a cool concept, and I'm very glad that it has been part of this story. But we can't escape the fact that Discovery is a prequel to 619 episodes and 13 films, and the mycelial network isn't part of any of them. And in this episode, Stamets describes the role of the mycelial network in a way that makes that a bit of a problem.
If we don't stop them soon, the contamination will be irreversible. The network will continue to deteriorate everywhere. Here in this universe, back in ours, across the entire multiverse.
And when it does,
life as we know it will cease to exist.
If I reverse engineer the coordinates that Lorca used to get us here, I should be able to pinpoint the right pathway to take. And that will get us to the same point in our timeline, or at least close to it.
There'll be infinite pathways opening up in front of you. That's going to be really...
Hard is the word you're looking for? But I don't accept no-win scenarios.
To say that it exists, but our crews, meaning our crews from the original series forward, don't know about it is fine. I have no problem with that. But for it to exist and to play such a fundamentally important role in the very existence of life and how universes interact, is a tough thing to introduce in a prequel to such a well-fleshed-out world as Star Trek. Stamets's explanation about how the network connects all universes, and as we see, it not only connects universes as physical locations, but it also connects all points in time and facilitates time travel within a single or among all universes. You can go anywhere in the multiverse. That fundamentally changes the way we think about universes in Star Trek. This whole little 4-episode jaunt is built on the premise that there are two distinct universes that are tethered to one another, and in which history pretty much follows an identical path, with statistically insignificant variations. These universes are not meant to interact, and only through some rare event, such as simultaneous transport attempts in each universe by the same people in the same location during an ion storm, allows them to be momentarily bridged. But the mycelial network suggests that there are many universes and that they are all connected by a network that can be navigated by anyone with spore drive technology and a set of coordinates. I say it suggests that. Stamets really says that in this episode. And what's more, you can travel to any point in the past or future so long as you know where you are going. It's incredibly fascinating. It's one of the more interesting ideas ever presented in Star Trek, but its introduction comes after 734 stories, 632 of which take place later on the timeline. So the mycelial network cannot remain accessible to Starfleet as it has thus far in Discovery. But it can't be destroyed either, since we were just told that it is integral to life in all universes. So what do? It seems that in the final 2 episodes, they'll have to seal off the mycelial network, and all knowledge of it will have to be classified. The fact that it was the bridge to the mirror universe and posed such danger would be the perfect reason for all information about it to be locked away, hence no one in the future knows about it. But not before it is used to prevent the Klingons from winning the war, resurrect Culber, and bring a good version of Lorca back to life.
Lords of the Empire, privileged guests, all hail Her Most Imperial Majesty, Mother of the Fatherland, Overlord of Vulcan, Dominus of Kronos, Regina Andor. All hail the Emperor, Philippa Giorgio Augustus Eoponius Centaurius.
For the notes section, I have just one topic, which I've been saving for the end of the Mirror Universe arc: Terran Emperors. On screen, we've only seen 2 emperors, both female, Hoshi Sato and Philippa Giorgio. But the expanded universe has done its part to flesh out history, and there have been 21 named emperors of the Terran Empire. According to the Decipher RPG module, Through a Glass Darkly, released in 2005, the first emperor of the Terran Empire was Sherman. No time period is given, so it isn't clear to whom this refers, but given the idea that the empire stretches back at least centuries, based on various statements made in Enterprise, it could refer to William Tecumseh Sherman, the general during the U.S. Civil War, who later became commanding general of the U.S. Army. The next emperor that we hear about is Adolf Hitler, surprise, surprise, also in the same RPG module, and he was followed by Pol Pot. In real life, Pol Pot was the leader of Cambodia's Khmer Rouge from 1963 to 1997 and guided the Cambodian genocide of 1975 to 79. So you can see where they're going there with those 2 choices. Evil in one universe, evil in another. Sticking with the RPG module and still in the 20th century, Pol Pot was followed by a man named Oswald, who seems to be a character created for the story, although it could be a reference to Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald met with Mirror Spock, who had become displaced to the 20th century and was influenced by Spock's pacifist agenda to form an underground dissident group known as the Oswaldites, which, admit it, would be a great name for a band. After Oswald, the next emperor was, wait for it, Jimmy Carter. Yes, that Jimmy Carter. He was apparently driven not by peanuts, but by the idea of space conquest. And the last emperor of the 20th century was a direct in-universe tie-in to Voyager. Henry Starling, who you'll remember from Future's End, used the technology from Captain Braxton's time ship to unseat the political class and take over the Empire. Now, let's jump into the 21st century and leave the Decipher RPG module behind, at least for a moment. In the novella Age of the Empress by Dayton Ward and Kevin Dillmore, published in 2007, which I've mentioned on a couple of episodes of Notes, I believe, the Terran Emperor is George II. While it isn't explicitly stated, this seems to be a reference to George W. Bush. The next emperor we hear about on the timeline is Hoshi Sato in Enterprise's In a Mirror Darkly. She becomes known as Empress Sato I, and she was cloned twice, spawning Sato II and Sato III. The clones ruled in the final decade of her dynasty, and in all, Sato reigned for 122 years, until 2277, when Sato III was replaced by Spock. Of course, there's Philippa Georgiou, as we have now seen on Discovery, the reign of whom overlaps with that of Sato, which is one reason why I wonder if we've been watching the same mirror universe. Although I don't really hold the writers to following any sort of timeline that's established in gaming or literature. But, they have taken a lot of stuff from the lit for this series, so why not? In William Shatner's Spectre, written together with Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens and published in 1998, the Emperor was Androver Drake. He was assassinated by Kirk in 2277, the same year Spock took the throne from Sato III and David Mack's The Sorrows of Empire, published in 2007. So you can see how muddy this all gets. And maybe it's not possible to really follow through with what's been established. Androver Drake, by the way, in the Prime universe was a real character. Drake was an Academy rival of Kirk's who helped David Marcus obtain the protomatter for Project Genesis, and was also part of Admiral Cartwright's anti-peace conspiracy in the Undiscovered Country. Isn't it neat how everything ties into everything in the literature? It's a bit too much sometimes, I have to admit, even though I do love the lit. Anyway, these bits of character development about Androver Drake are from The Ashes of Eden by David Marcus's dad. Kirk. Shatner, with the help of Judith and Garfield in 1995. Kirk himself became Emperor Tiberius I as a result of assassinating Drake. For the remaining emperors, all in the 23rd century, we must return to the Decipher RPG module Through a Glass Darkly. These are Stefan Löfven, a Terran who the Andorians thought was the reincarnation of an ancient Andorian warrior named Crotus. Don't even ask how that's possible. Garth of Izar from the TOS episode Whom Gods Destroy, John Gill from the TOS episode Patterns of Force, also referenced in Enterprise's In a Mirror Darkly, Harry Mudd, Kodos, Alex Danaher, a man who tried to continue Spock's reforms but was stifled by the Klingon-Cardassian alliance, tying into the DS9 mirror universe, and John Cray, the final emperor that we hear of and the one who presided over the economic collapse of the Empire following Earth's devastation by the Well probe, and, wait for it, George and Gracie, who turned into armored sea monsters after talking to the probe. Now, how's that for a way to end the list? So there you have it, the full, odd list of Terran Emperors. Do you have a favorite? All right, so those are the Notes from the Edge for week 13 of Star Trek Discovery. Notes is just part of our coverage of Discovery. Be sure to check out everything we do throughout the week on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Brandy and Bruce go live on YouTube with Live from the Edge. And you can take part in the show by interacting with them on Twitter or through chat. And we do make those announcements on Twitter, so watch for that and you'll know when it's about to start. And if you can't join live, don't worry, you can still listen to the show on Tuesday mornings when it is released as a podcast. Commentary tracks will be available each Wednesday as Tracks from the Edge with Mike and usually Max, sometimes a different guest. We'll discuss your feedback on Postcards from the Edge on Thursdays with Amy. And of course, you can catch full analysis on the Edge main show on Fridays with Brandon and guests. I wrap things up here each week on Notes from the Edge on Saturdays or Sundays, usually Sundays, with this kind of deep dive into the links between Discovery and the broader franchise that I've given you today. You'll find all of these in the main feed for the Edge and in the Trek FM master feed. And all along the way, we'd love to hear your thoughts on Discovery. The best place to do that is in the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook, where Amy Nelson will collect your feedback for Postcards from the Edge. Just type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up. If it doesn't, just type the whole name, and you'll find it. It is a closed group, so if you're not yet a member, you'll need to click Join and answer 2 questions, and then a moderator will let you into the group. You can also find us on Twitter. Our username is TrekFM, or send us email using the contact form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Just choose to send to a show and choose the Edge, and that'll go out to all the different hosts on all the different subshows. If you'd like to find me personally, you can find me there in the Babel Conference, of course, but perhaps the best place to converse with me is on Twitter. That's where I'm the most active. My username is C Bryan Jones, a letter C, and Bryan with a Y, and that's my name pretty much everywhere in social media. If you'd like to hear me discuss Star Trek Beyond Discovery, you can catch my main show, The Ready Room, and I also co-host The Orb, our Deep Space Nine podcast with Matthew Rushing. I mentioned both of those today during the show. You'll also hear me on lots of older episodes from various shows, as I used to host, I think it was 7 different shows every week, one of those being Warp 5, our Enterprise show, which I also mentioned today. And you can find my writing about Star Trek on the official website at StarTrek.com. I'd like to take a moment and thank our associate producers of The Edge, Norman C. Lau, Tony Robinson, Tom Paleo, Lisa Slack, Shoaib Mirza, Richard Rutledge, James Muldrow, and Cornelia Rotner. Thank you so much, guys, for your support. I really appreciate it. You make a huge difference in our ability to get The Edge and all the various sub-shows, and in fact, all the podcasts on the network out to everyone every week. So thank you so much. And if you're not yet supporting the network and you love what we're doing and you want to be a part of it, just visit patreon.com/TrekFM to find out how. That's patreon.com/TrekFM. You can get all the details there about things like the Patrons Roundtable, where you can get on mic with fellow listeners and some of our hosts and talk Star Trek, and we actually push that out to everyone as a podcast. We also have Patron Zone, our special website for patrons, and other perks, and you can become an associate producer if you like. All the details are there for you at patreon.com/TrekFM, and I really appreciate your support. Well, that's all I have for you this time. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great week, and join me again next time as we jot down more notes right on the paper's edge.